28-year-old Anni Nina Hindocha was born to Vinod and Nilam Hindocha in Sweden. Her family originally hailed from Uganda, but in the early 1970s, they were forced to flee their homeland. Uganda's dictator, Idi Amin, had ordered all Ugandans of South Asian descent to leave the country within 90 days. It was a time of chaos and fear. The Hindocha family was granted residency in Sweden and settled in the small town of Mariestad before Annie was born. In Sweden, Vinod thrived. He started a successful business, and the family built a comfortable, stable life. Annie grew up alongside her two siblings, a sister named Ami and a brother named Anish. Intelligent, ambitious, and confident, Annie was the apple of her father's eye. Vinod admitted that he spoiled her, but said he simply couldn't help himself. Annie's cousin later described her as the glue that held the family together, the natural leader of the pack. After university, Annie moved to Stockholm and secured a job in marketing with the global telecommunications giant, Ericsson. By her mid-20s, she was dreaming of settling down, finding love, and starting a family. She adored her sister's children and wanted a life full of family and happiness. Annie regularly traveled to London, drawn to its shopping, social scene, and endless opportunities. During one of these visits, she met 30-year-old Shrien Dewani, a millionaire businessman from Bristol. Shrien had built success within his family's nursing home business and accumulated wealth before reaching 30. It was Annie's aunt who first spotted Shrien and thought he would be the perfect match for her niece. She arranged a casual meeting at a coffee shop. At first, Annie wasn't impressed, but by the second date, she had warmed to him. Shrien, like Annie, came from a family with Ugandan roots. His parents had also fled Idi Amin's brutal regime. Some people who knew Shrien described him as arrogant and showy, a man who loved flaunting his wealth. Others said he was genuinely kind and generous beneath the surface. Annie's sister recalled that Annie always spoke about Shrien's sense of humor and how he protected her. Their relationship soon became long distance, each visiting the other when they could. But the distance created tension. Both were headstrong, and arguments flared. At one point, Annie even broke things off. Still, love found a way. They reconciled, and Annie left her life in Stockholm behind to move into an apartment in Luton, England. When the two families met, Vinod admitted feeling a bit overwhelmed by the Dewani family's wealth, but he was made to feel welcome. Both sides approved of the relationship. Vinod especially liked that Shrien believed in abstaining from sex before marriage, a sign, he thought, of true respect for his daughter. The wedding was set for October 2010. It would be a grand affair, held just outside of Mumbai. Hundreds of guests flew in from around the world to attend the lavish 3-day celebration. Annie spent months planning every detail. Vinod, who had been saving for his children's weddings since they were born, wanted to give his daughter everything she had ever dreamed of. From the outside, it looked perfect. But behind the smiles and rituals, some of Annie's close friends sensed something strange. One friend said the wedding didn't feel like Annie's style at all. Another said it felt like Annie wasn't fully present, like she was going through the motions. Despite any quiet doubts, the wedding ended with glamour and joy. Soon after, the newlyweds departed for their honeymoon, a surprise trip to South Africa planned entirely by Shrien. Shrien said he chose South Africa because the initials matched. S for Shrien, A for Annie. They spent a few eventful days in Johannesburg before flying into Cape Town on November 12, 2010. Upon landing, Shrien ignored the hotel's luxury car service and flagged down a local shuttle, a cheaper, less secure option. A driver named Zola Tango picked them up in a silver Volkswagen minivan. During the drive, Shrien arranged for Tango to pick them up the following night for dinner and possibly act as a guide around Cape Town. Tango agreed. Shrien and Annie checked into the lavish Cape Grace Hotel overlooking the waterfront. The next day before the evening dinner, Annie and Shrien relaxed at the hotel bar. They had a few drinks, took photos, and appeared to be in good spirits. Shrien had made a reservation at 96 Winery Road, one of Cape Town's most acclaimed restaurants. At around 7:30 p.m., Zola Tango arrived to collect them in his minivan. But somewhere along the way, Annie and Shrien changed their minds. They decided they weren't in the mood for a heavy meal. Instead, they wanted something lighter. Tango suggested an alternative restaurant he knew. He veered off the highway and eventually took them to Surfside Restaurant in the Strand area. After a brief meal, Shrien and Anni were picked up again by Tongo around 10:30 p.m. According to Shrien, Anni then expressed a desire to experience the real South Africa, to see the nightlife in the townships. Shrien said she was curious, insistent even, about seeing parts of Cape Town that tourists usually didn't visit. And so, they drove into Gugulethu. Gugulethu, even by Cape Town standards, was dangerous. It was a place plagued by extreme poverty and violent crime. Between 2005 and 2010, over 700 murders had taken place there, one every 2.5 days for 5 consecutive years. Locals rarely ventured outside after dark. Police themselves would only travel into certain townships in groups. Yet, Shrien, Anni, and Tongo headed straight into it. At 10:45 p.m., the van stopped at an intersection. Suddenly, 2 armed men emerged from the darkness. They pounded on the vehicle, waving guns. Chaos erupted. The attackers dragged Tongo out of the driver's seat and seized control of the vehicle. Inside the van, Anni and Shrien clung to each other in fear. The men demanded valuables: Shrien's watch, their phones, Anni's jewelry. For nearly an hour, they drove through the streets while the couple sat helpless in the back seat. Eventually, the vehicle stopped. The driver turned and said they would let them go, but separately. Shrien was forced out onto the street, left standing alone in the dark. The attackers sped away into the night with Anni still trapped inside. Distraught, Shrien stumbled through the township, banging on doors, begging for help. A local man finally answered and called the police. By the early hours of the morning, authorities located the minivan, abandoned in Khayelitsha, roughly 20 minutes from Gugulethu. Inside, across the back seat, lay Anni's lifeless body. She had been shot once, execution style, in the neck. The bullet lodged itself in the seat behind her. There were bruises across her body, and the coroner later confirmed she would have bled to death, alone, terrified, far from home. Meanwhile, Vinod Hindocha, Anni's father, was in Amsterdam waiting to board a connecting flight. He received a devastating phone call. His daughter, vibrant, joyful Anni, was dead. When Vinod landed in Cape Town, he was met by Shrien at the Cape Grace Hotel. They hugged and cried. It was every father's worst nightmare. But from the beginning, something didn't sit right with the detectives. Why would an experienced driver like Zola Tongo take honeymooners into a notoriously dangerous township at night, and without warning them? Why had Shrien and Tongo both survived unharmed, while only Anni was killed? And why, detectives wondered, had the attackers, professional criminals in a high-crime area, simply abandoned the car afterward without even trying to hide it? The day after Anni's body was discovered, the Cape Town police launched a full-scale investigation. This wasn't just another violent crime. This was international news. A honeymoon gone horribly wrong, a young bride murdered in cold blood. The pressure to solve the case was enormous. At first, Zola Tongo, the taxi driver, appeared fully cooperative. He willingly answered police questions, recounting how the minivan was hijacked, how he was forced out, and how helpless he had felt. The police moved quickly. Within days, forensic teams lifted fingerprints from the abandoned vehicle. One of those prints led them to Zolile Mngeni, a known criminal whose details were already in the police database. When police arrived at his home, they found more than just Mngeni. Hidden between the mattress and bed frame was a mobile phone. When asked who it belonged to, Mngeni claimed it belonged to none other than Zola Tongo. Under pressure, Mngeni cracked. He admitted to being involved in the carjacking and murder. He also named another man, Mziwama Doda Kwabe, as an accomplice. Kwabe was arrested 2 days later. But as police pieced together the puzzle, another surprising name surfaced, Mondem Bolombo, a hotel receptionist who worked nearby. During one of Kwabe's interrogations, as he was being escorted through the station, he asked, in English, to speak to Mbolombo. In passing, he told him, "Tell them everything." Police now had 3 suspects connected to the murder. The case seemed to be moving fast. But then, something no one expected happened. Zola Tongo, the man who had appeared so helpful, so willing to assist investigators, was arrested. And not just for being negligent. He was charged with involvement in Anni's murder. Friends of Tongo were stunned. He had no prior criminal record, no history of trouble. He was seen as reliable and law-abiding. How could he be involved? But it didn't end there. While behind bars, Tongo made an explosive claim, one that would flip the entire case on its head. He said this was no random hijacking. According to Tongo, Shrien Dewani had planned everything. Tongo alleged that on the day he picked up Shrien and Anni from the airport, Shrien stayed back after Anni went inside the hotel. On the CCTV footage, you could see Shrien sitting in Tongo's car, talking for nearly 10 minutes. During that conversation, Tongo said, Shrien asked if he could arrange for someone to be taken off the scene. When Tongo refused, saying he wasn't that kind of person, Shrien allegedly asked if he knew someone who could make it happen. Tongo claimed Shrien offered 15,000 rand, less than 1,000 pounds at the time, to arrange the hit. He further said that after leaving the airport, he contacted Mondembolombo at the hotel, who helped him find people who would carry out the crime. Phone records backed part of the story. There were multiple calls between Tongo, Umbolombo, and Kwabi. At one point, hotel CCTV even caught Umbolombo speaking into his phone, allegedly discussing that thing we talked about and saying it must happen today. On the day of the murder, Tongo claimed he met Shrien around noon to exchange money. Shrien wanting to convert cash outside the hotel, allegedly to fund the plan. Later, during dinner at Surfside Restaurant, Tongo said Shrien pulled him aside to confirm. Were the men ready? Was everything arranged? According to investigators, Shrien and Tongo continued exchanging texts and calls into the night. Even as they drove toward Gugulethu, Tongo said that Shrien had hidden the cash inside an envelope tucked behind the driver's seat. Payment for the killers. Cell phone tower records later confirmed that multiple calls and texts had been exchanged between Shrien and Tongo at crucial times. Still, there was a major problem. Shrien's phone disappeared after the murder. The text messages themselves were gone forever. It was now a full-blown media firestorm. Some believed Tongo. Others said his story was suspicious, motivated by his desire for a lighter sentence. Anni's family was faced with a horrifying decision. If Tongo's plea deal was accepted, he would receive a significantly reduced sentence in exchange for testifying against Shrien. Despite their pain, Anni's family agreed. They said, above all else, they wanted the truth, whatever that might be. The deeper the authorities dug, the stranger the case became. Some reporters pointed out that it seemed unlikely Shrien would conspire with the first taxi driver he met in a foreign country. Others said the very idea that Tongo would participate in a cold-blooded murder for such a low payment was suspicious. Still, Tongo's confession wasn't made in isolation. It was backed by timelines, phone records, and the admissions of Kwabe and Mngani, who also pointed fingers at Shrien. In the meantime, Anni's family flew back to London, grieving, broken, and desperate for answers. The image of Anni, beautiful, joyful Anni, being left alone in the darkness that night haunted them. And back in the UK, a darker rumor began to spread. Had Shrien been living a secret life all along? The murder of Anni Dewani shattered more than just a family's dreams. It exposed painful questions that may never be fully answered. Was this the tragic result of a random crime in a dangerous place? Or was there something far more sinister planned from the start? As the years pass, the truth remains tangled in accusations, contradictions, and secrets buried deep. At Buried Secrets, we believe every victim deserves their story to be told, fully, honestly, and without silence. Anni's story reminds us, even in moments of joy, darkness can be just around the corner. What do you think happened that night in Cape Town? Was Anni Dewani the victim of a terrible coincidence or a chilling betrayal? Share your thoughts below. We read every comment. And if you found this story as haunting as we did, please like this video, subscribe to Buried Secrets, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story that deserves to be remembered. We'll see you in the next investigation.